Hi, everybody. It's Ian here from IBI Performance Coaching, and today we're going to be digging into the truth behind task switching, otherwise known as multitasking. I think this is really going to be eye-opening and very useful for a lot of you out there. So enjoy. When I was younger, it was called multitasking, and people talked a lot about multitasking, and it was almost thought of as a skill that you could develop something that was like a superpower. Then it became a dirty word, and it was given the moniker task switching because people said, well, your brain can only really focus on one thing at a time, and so you're not actually doing multiple tasks at any one time. You're doing one task, and then you're switching to another, and you're switching to another. And this realization came alongside research that showed that it really was detrimental to productivity. Despite the fact that you might feel as though you're doing all these different things and juggling all these balls or keeping all these plates spinning at once, and that was increasing your productivity, the truth was you were actually hurting that productivity pretty significantly. And so the research that you may be familiar with says that when you switch tasks, when you get distracted and come back to a task, it takes 23 minutes and 15 seconds to refocus on the task that you originally left. That is, in my estimation, an absurd number for at least my personal experience. 23 minutes is a heck of a long time. I don't know about you, but I have accomplished any number of different tasks within a 23-minute window. Tasks that weren't the same, right? Tasks where I might have been replying to emails, and then I might have been switching to inputting data into a spreadsheet, and then I might have been doing research, and then, these are not the same kind of task. They require different parts of your brain, but for some reason, I'm able to switch between them more or less seamlessly and check off that to-do list. So for any of you that have found yourself in that focused mode where you're just, you're making your way down that to-do list, and you might be wondering, it really can't be that bad. There's no way it takes 23 minutes to refocus on the task. Otherwise, you do one task on your to-do list, and then it would take you 23 minutes to even start the second one or even make any sort of meaningful progress. So something is a bit fishy here, and I think I know what that thing is. So based upon my experience and the sort of rubber meets the road reality of task switching, I don't think it's all that terrible given a certain number of conditions are in place, are met. Really, it comes down to whether or not the tasks are similar enough. And how do you know whether tasks are similar enough that you can easily, more or less seamlessly switch between them and continue your momentum? It's not so much about the task as it is about the context. So, is the context like I am at my computer or I am doing some work there, and even if the work is different work, it is all within the same sort of bucket, as it were. It's all professional work, or it's all related to family things. Maybe those all can go in one even larger bucket. And I would argue that that is where the skill of task switching can be developed. You can expand that bucket. As I said, it comes down to context. And really, the reason it comes down to context is because at the root of it, it comes down to identity. It's a question of which identity you are bringing to that work. If the same identity can remain consistent across the different tasks that you're doing, then I think you can, for many people, switch more or less seamlessly between those tasks without a big loss of focus. Whereas if you're having to switch identities to accomplish those tasks, this is where things get very tricky, because while you might not be able to focus on more than one thing at a time, you certainly can't be more than one person at any given time. So, what do I mean by this? Well, we're all going to have multiple identities that we employ in different venues. When you're at work, you might have a professional identity. When you are hanging out with your friends, you're going to have a different identity. When you're with your romantic partner, or you're taking care of your kids, or you're at your parents' house, you're going to have different identities that show up almost without your knowledge in those situations. And those identities have different assumptions, they have different associations, they have different beliefs, they have different ways of doing things. And when you start importing an identity that is not consistent, not conducive to the kind of activity that you're doing, this is where things you run into a lot of trouble. So a great example would be like if I am in productive professional mode at my computer, working on stuff, trying to crank through a to-do list or get stuff done, and my kids are also home at that time, things get really messy because they might need help with their homework. They might want to have a snack. They might be asking about something that if I were in my devoted dad identity wouldn't be an issue at all. I'd be happy to do it. And I'm still happy to do it more or less when I'm in that productive professional mode, but my response to their requests will not be as skillful as it would otherwise be. And when I react unskillfully to their totally reasonable requests, the devoted dad identity sees that as you dropped the ball, you failed. And you set up a sort of conflict between identities. So if you remember, a couple weeks ago, I did a video that talked about internal family systems as a model for psychic multiplicity, healthy psychic multiplicity is what they call it. And it pointed out that your different parts of your psyche can have interactions with one another. They can they can align with one another. They can be friendly, but they can also undercut one another and argue and betray one another. And so I would say that a similar thing can happen with your identities. Now you're only ever one identity at a time, but that switching can happen quickly when they're bantering back and forth and calling one another out for their perceived failings. So when I'm in devoted dad mode and I'm trying to do productive professional stuff, the professional's not happy with the kind of stuff that the dad is doing, and vice versa. Okay. So what do we do with this idea that instead of task switching being the problem, it's like identity juggling that is really what gets us in trouble. Because switching fully into a different identity can take time if you are not conscientious about how you do it, if you're not purposeful in how you do it. And that brings us to the concept of prosoche. Prosoche is a foundational concept in Stoic philosophy, and it is essentially a combination of what you might think of as like mindfulness, something that Buddhism has popularized, being present in the current moment, not living in the anxiety or fear of stories you tell yourself about the future, and not living in the potential regrets of the past, but be here now. But this is only one half of prosoche. The other half is being purposeful. And purposeful is it's almost a technical term from systems theory, the way that I'm using it here. And it implies that you are actively, consciously choosing the purpose which you are pursuing. You're not on autopilot, right? And not every system is a purposeful system, right? There are many systems that are purposive systems. These are things like autopilots on planes where they can fly a certain way, but if an obstacle shows up, they are able to change the flight plan or something like that to get to where they're trying to get to. But they don't get to choose where they're trying to get to. They don't get to choose the destination. That is something that's reserved for purposeful systems like human beings. So are you being present and are you purposeful? Do you have sort of your end goal, your destination in mind? Those two things will allow you to be both connected and rational. Okay, and this is a prosoke mindset. And when you're in a prosoke mindset, it's going to really allow you to be aware of which identity you're functioning in. And really, so much of this stuff, so much of this personal development stuff starts with, if not ends with, awareness. Awareness is a superpower that we have. It's really just about employing it. Okay, some ways to operationalize this insight are: one, time blocking. Time blocking is something that should be very familiar to most professionals out there. But the way that most people do time blocking is they'll say, like, this is the task, the type of task that I'm going to work on during this time. And I would suggest that it might even be more effective to time block based upon identity. Who are you going to be during that time? Who are you going to be? So maybe instead of putting down, emails, something like that, you put down like to-do list destroyer, or productive professional that I brought up before, right? Or efficient emailer, or some sort of identity that you have come up with that is tailor-made for the style of tasks that you're going to be going through. Now, I would probably avoid, though you may have a lot of emails, so efficient emailer might work out well for you, but for those of you who tend to switch from emails to data input to light research, so these sorts of things, keep it as an identity that covers all of those things. It would be my advice there. For those of you, then you have, maybe you time block family time, right? Family time, but that doesn't give you any sort of direction with regard to how you're showing up. So instead, maybe put down devoted dad time, right? And that's who you're going to be during that time, how you're going to approach whatever challenges show up during that time. So slightly a bit of a tweak on time blocking there. A second operationalizing approach would be micro rituals. Micro rituals are basically little interventions that take advantage of the liminal spaces that you have scattered throughout your day. So if you drive home from work and you park your car in the garage, okay, that space between being a driver on the road and being a parent at home, when you're switching between there, you're in a liminal space, and that gives you a chance to make the transition conscientiously and effectively. So instead of just getting out of your car and sort of going with the default flow, this is where that prosoke comes into handy. Be more purposeful, be more present. Say, I'm going to stay in the car for an extra 3 breaths, and I'm going to set some sort of purpose. Who do I want to be as a parent when I open this car door, when I get out of the car and enter my house and see my kids for the, maybe the first time today? How do I want to how do I want to greet them? That kind of thing. These are micro rituals, and you can attach them to all sorts of triggers. They can be place triggers, they can be behavioral triggers. Typically, things that you do every day make very good triggers for this kind of stuff. So micro rituals, very, very helpful. Another one would be to consider your uniforms. Now, I don't know if you have had this experience, but I certainly have. I know my wife has, where you wear clothes for work all day, and they're like comfortable clothes. I have very comfortable polo shirts and chino pants and things like this that I wear to work. But when I get home after work, suddenly those clothes that I was comfortable in all day feel very uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. And I don't think it's just because now I have more comfortable options. I think it's because those clothes are my professional uniform. And the identity of being a professional at work is no longer a suitable or appropriate or comfortable identity given the change in context. And so one of the first things I do when I get home, even if I have a ton of things to do and very little time to do them in, is change clothes, because I feel more functional when I've changed clothes into something that I might consider my dad at home, or parent, or husband, or something like that, uh, uniform. All right. So think about when you're changing your clothes. What does putting on a baseball cap when you're going to be a devoted dad, does that make sense for you? This sort of uniform change can be quite powerful psychologically. Okay. Third, and this is not so much, this is more of a blanket recommendation, but a couple weeks ago I talked about a practice called dropping anchor that comes from acceptance and commitment therapy. And it simply consists of 3 steps that follow the acronym ACE, ACE. So first comes with awareness, acceptance, that sort of thing. So paying attention to how you actually feel right now and accepting that state, right? Then you have connection, that's the C. So this is connection to your body, okay? Connect to something physical about you. Good ways to do this are push your feet into the ground a little bit so that you're feeling grounded, right? Fix your posture. Posture is huge. Take some good, deep, diaphragmatic breaths, okay? This kind of stuff can help reset physically. Okay, so we have awareness and acceptance is the A. We have connecting to your body, your physiology, and then the E is expanding your awareness or environment, right? Basically, seeing where you are currently. So look around the room. What do you see around you? You can name a couple things. What do you hear? Do you smell anything? And that will put you in a time and place. Okay, that will give you the presence portion of the Prosoke formula. And then once you have reestablished that, you have now reset yourself at a choice point, allowing you to become purposeful, to choose what purpose you are going to pursue. So this is something that you can use regularly all throughout the day. Treat it like an exercise, treat it like a practice that you want to develop your, the strength of and your facility with. Okay, use it a lot, and it will help you to identify what identity you're in, and then to choose which identity you think is most appropriate given this context and your purpose. Okay, and then finally, how do you really state switch? How do you manage that state? State management kind of comes down to 3 things. It comes down to your physiology, right? That is, what you're doing with your body. So the way that you use your body as a professional, productive professional, will be different from the way you use it as a devoted dad. So how does a devoted dad breathe? How does he walk? How does he, his facial gestures, his hand gestures, these sorts of things. So you can manage your state first through your physiology. Second is through your focus. So what is it that you're paying attention to? So a clear one would be, as a productive professional, maybe you are focused for a long period of time on a single task, whereas when you are in devoted dad mode, now you are, paying attention to the sort of feelings, interaction with your kids. You're giving them your undivided attention. Okay, that's a clear example, but really, how you focus. Are you focusing on challenges and problems? Are you focusing on opportunities? Are you focusing on risks? Are you focusing on potential rewards? Okay, these kind of questions will come into play as well. So far we have physiology and focus, and then the last one is language. So how are you speaking out loud, but also to yourself? What does your internal dialogue sound like? Your internal and external dialogue are going to sound very different depending upon which identity you're employing. So think about what kind of things you would say when you want to be a productive professional. Think about productive professionals that you admire, that you would like to be more like, and model yourself after them. And then do the same thing with, the parent personage that you're trying to strengthen. What kind of language would you use, both internally and externally? Okay, so this is what I think is the truth about task switching. I hope that you found this useful. If you have any questions about how to put this into practice or about the sort of concepts that I've laid out here, please share them down below. I appreciate everybody who supports the channel. It really makes a big difference to me to see the comments and the likes and that kind of stuff. So I truly, truly appreciate you. If you're interested in learning more, getting more in touch, there's a Facebook group you can check out below. And of course, there are workout programs for busy parents and professionals that get you fantastic results with very little equipment, if any at all, and very little space. And I would say they're probably just about the most efficient workout programs that have ever been designed by anyone, at least that I've seen, that still get really fantastic results. And we're talking about fat burning, muscle building, strength improvements, all that kind of stuff. Okay, take it easy, everybody. Just remember, excellence is a habit. Elite performance is a choice. So it's up to you to make that choice. Go get it.